Okay, so let's take a look at some of the effects I used here in Shine the Light. Now, all of these effects channels or effects returns I've pulled in from an effects session that I have set up. And it consists of a few reverbs, a few delays, and a few spatial effects like chorus and flange and those type of things. Now, I've set this session up solely for the purpose of bringing in effects to a mix that I'm currently working on. So let me show you how to import those from a dedicated effects session. So first off, we want to go up here to File, Import Session Data. Next, you want to navigate to the session that you want to pull the effects from. And this is my effects session here. Now, you can see in the middle of this dialog is a list of all the tracks in the session. Now, I've got all my effects in this effects session set up on auxiliary tracks, and we're going to bring in all of these into the session. And I've also got my master, fader, and output buses set up here in my effects session, and we're going to bring those in as well because it's going to help me save some time in the mix session because all the routing and everything on those master tracks is already done. So to bring in all of these, you hold Option, click on any one of those tracks. It'll set them up to a new track, and then you click OK, and that is pretty much it. Bringing in tracks from a different session. Now, I'm just going to cancel here because I've already brought these tracks into this session. So now let's go through each of these effects one by one, and I'll talk about the settings and what they all are. So the first effect here is a room, and it's really just more for percussive stuff. Not a very big reverb, but it kind of sits in the background and it just adds a little bit of ambience to, like I said, our percussion and some of those type of instruments. So I've chosen the room number 2 preset with a small room setting and 200 milliseconds, or just slightly over 200 milliseconds. Now you'll want to make sure that your effects are set to 100% wet if they have a mix knob on them. We only want to be hearing the effect on these effects channels. We don't want to be hearing any of the dry signal at all. And I've gone through and tweaked these effects during the mix just a little bit, and that's pretty common. So let's take a look at the next effect we've got up here. This is the EMT 140 from Universal Audio. This is a fantastic sounding plate. It's very rich and it's got a lot of subtle complexity happening in the reverb tail. So, I've used this for my short plate. I think I got this for another plate, maybe my vocal plate. Just awesome sounding reverb. I'm going to use Reverb B for this plugin. And we're adding just a little bit of highs, and we're making sure we cut everything off at 125 hertz. I don't want any big bass happening in this reverb. This is just a nice short guy. Okay, let's take a look at the next reverb here. This is the EMT 250 from Universal Audio, and it's set at 1.2 milliseconds. So just a little bit longer than our last reverb, our short plate. I did add a little bit of high end on this guy. And it just sits really nice in the track. Okay, moving on to the next effect. This is the vocal plate, again using the EMT 140 from Universal Audio. Now, I did add this after I'd gotten into the mix and realized that none of the effects tracks that I had set up really did what I wanted it to do for the vocals. So I set this one at 1.5 seconds for the reverb tail and gave it just a little bit of boost on the low end, not really much on the high, and rolled it off at about 80 hertz. I did, however, want to pull out a little bit of that mid-range from the reverb, and the EQ on the EMT 140 itself doesn't allow you to do that. So I pulled up a stock Digi EQ and just pulled out a little bit right around 2K That just leaves a little bit more space for Jackson's voice to, really take over that sonic space. I want the reverb, backing him up, but not stealing the show. Next, we have the longest reverb in the session, which is our hall reverb. Now, I've chosen the Lexicon 224 for this reverb. It's a great sounding reverb, very complex, rich, and it really allows those sounds that you want to be in the background to kind of fall into the background and really just get blended together. In this song, I found 2.6 seconds seemed to be the right time for the reverb tail to achieve that kind of softening and blending that I wanted. All right, moving on to delays. I use a lot of delays in my sessions. I love delays. They're great at adding space and depth without clouding things up with too much reverb. So the first delay that I've got on here is just a simple slap delay from Pro Tools. I've got it set to 64 milliseconds on the left and 59 on the right. Now, this is their stereo version of this delay, not to be confused with the multi-mono version. I like this version because you get the left and the right all in one plugin window. And, I use this delay quite a bit. I'll take a stereo instrument and have the left side going to the right side of this delay. Have the left side of that instrument panned going to the right side of this delay. And I really feel like it adds another kind of cool stereo dimension. And moving on to the next delay, I've got an eighth note delay set up here. Now, I really like to keep my delays in time with the tempo of the session, and these Pro Tools delays make it extremely easy. You just click on whatever fraction of the delay you want. This case, eighth note. Click on it on the left and the right side, and you've got your delay. It's going to follow the tempo of the session, which is very handy if you have tempo changes or anything like that going on. Now, I have chosen to roll off all of the highs for the eighth note delay, and I do that because you don't want the T's and the C's and the consonants poking through. This delay is just meant to really be in the background and kind of add some depth. I don't want any of those, those hard consonant noises sticking through. So we've rolled off everything, usually between 1 and 2K. Moving on, the next delay is our quarter note delay, and I love the Waves H delay. This thing is super duper easy to use. It's got a high pass and a low pass filter. The feedback knob, it's incredibly easy to use. Now, we are rolling off the lows in this delay. This is a little bit longer delay. I don't want any of those lows clouding up the mix. So we're rolling it off at 263 hertz. And we are rolling off the top end again, right about 2K. I don't want any of those hard consonants sticking through. One thing to watch out for in this Waves H delay, this little analog knob here basically is a noise knob. So it defaults to setting number 2. That leaves a little bit of noise. You can see those meters bouncing right there. The first thing I do when I pull this plugin up is I crank it over to off. I don't want any extra noise in my mixes, especially if you're running 2 or 3 of these guys. It's the same noise. Basically, it's just going to cloudy things up. So make sure you turn that to off. Now, through the course of this mix, I felt that that quarter note delay started to stick out a little too much. I wanted it to be loud in the mix, but it was just too dry. It didn't fit with everything else. So I found this ensemble plugin from Avid. Now, I've got the mix set to 50% or so on here, and it's directly after that H delay on the auxiliary channel. So basically, that quarter note delay is now getting this kind of stereo spread to it. And it really just worked to help blend this delay back into the mix. All right, moving on to the next effect, we have a half note delay. This is, again, a Waves H delay set to half note, rolling off the lows and the highs, a little bit of feedback. And we do that because this half note delay is a much more musical delay. It's longer than the other 3 delays we have in the session. And it's really meant to kind of come up in some empty spaces and really extend some of those vocal ideas after the vocal is done singing. Now to accomplish that, I've put a compressor on this effects channel after the H delay. Now remember, the H delay is set to 100% wet, so the signal on this channel is effect only delay. Now you want to set the sidechain input on this compressor to the same bus as the input for that effect. Essentially what that does is every time a signal comes into that effect channel and gets delayed, that same input signal turns on the compressor and pushes that signal down. So when the lead vocal is singing, the delay is being compressed, and when the lead vocal stops singing, it allows the delay to kind of come up in the background. So I've also added a little bit of chorus and a little bit of hall reverb to this delay effect to kind of help it, meld into the background a little bit. And the last one of my delay effects I really love to use is a ping pong delay. This one is, again, the Waves H delay. You just click ping pong right in the middle, and you've got, right now it's set to 8th note, set it to 16th, whatever. So you've got an 8th note on the left and a quarter note on the right. Super easy delay to use. Once again, H delay, love it. Cutting off the lows, cutting off the highs. This is, a delay that's just to be kind of sprinkled in the background. Don't want it. Yeah, well, this one you might want stealing the show. I love the ping pong delays. The next effect I use in just about every session is some kind of chorus effect. You can use the Waves Meta Flanger, the chorus from Air, but I really like the Dimension D from Universal Audio and Roland. It's a subtle effect. It's one of those effects where you don't want to hear the effect per se. You don't want to go, oh, I hear a chorus on there. But you want to push a bunch of stuff into this effect just slightly, and it helps fill out your mix. And I'll show you when we get into each individual instrument what's going into the Dimension D. The next effect we've got is the MXR Flanger Doubler. This is just a really cool spatial effect. I added this kind of after the fact, kind of in the early stages of the mix, but I just wanted something else to kind of fill things out a little bit. So I found a cool preset in here and we went with that. And that wraps up all of the effects returns for this song. The next video, we're going to be looking at some of the routing and the master channel. So we'll see you then.